And then we came to what we saw to be, and to Jonathan's point last night, the game changer for us around behavioral change. And that was peer support groups, or social networks, or affiliations, or human contact, any way you want to describe it. The we map versus the me map. And when we started bringing people together in these small groups, we started finding amazing things would happen. People would be wanting to participate, and they would be achieving significant outcomes. And so then the question became, what would be the best ways to organize these groups? And we tried lots of different formats. We tried organizing by faith-based groups, by social networks, by neighbors, by tenants in a building, / neighbors, by workplaces. And I'll speak more about some of the outcomes we got and which one was particularly powerful for us. But the peer support group was another key piece. Then what we did was we created meetings for people that don't know how to lead meetings. Because to do this, it was a series of meetings that people had to engage in. 7 meetings over approximately 4 months. Not an easy hurdle to get over, to get people to commit 4 months of their time to changing their behavior. But with the meetings laid out carefully, allowing people to get support from the group and to make commitments to the group, we found that people were, and with clear guidelines on how to lead the meetings, people were engaging and willing to lead these meetings. Then we created a coach, someone who'd been through the process. And by the way, our job was always to try to stop at the next level up before we had to go to the next. So we tried to do the least amount possible to get behavior to change. That was always our goal. Not the most robust, but the least robust that we could make happen. We found that the coach added an extra value because they gave support to keep the team on the path. And then lastly, for communities and cities that eventually began to hire us to do design programs and lead programs, we created program managers that either trained our own team or the city to run with this. These were the results we achieved. We worked with 20,000 people, and we were able to get a 40% reduction in solid waste, 32% in water, 14% energy, 8% vehicle miles traveled, 15% CO2 emissions, and $255 savings. This is based on 20,000 people and over approximately a 10-year period working in a bunch of cities. And what we found was, and I'll say a lot more about this, these were not your green elite. These were a cross-section of a lot of different people who were part of these teams. So we answered the first question. Could you change behavior at a level that had a real impact on the environmental footprint that these individuals were having? That was the first question, and we came up with an affirmative on that. The second question was it sustained over time, or was there a lot of recidivism? We know there's recidivism in most behavioral change types of initiatives. Was there recidivism? What happened a year later, 2 years later? Were people still keeping these behaviors the way they were, or were they backsliding? And so 5 cities who hired us created longitudinal studies to find out if, in fact, this was sustained. Was this a good return on their investment, or were people going back to their old behaviors? 1 university did a 2-year longitudinal study. 1 market research firm funded by a foundation also did a longitudinal study. And this is what we found. We found that behaviors were sustained. In 1 study, 22 new behaviors were adopted. 21 were sustained 2 years later. 3 new ones were added. We also found that 53% of the people who participated transferred what they learned to their workplace. So they now became advocates and started changing the behaviors and practices in their workplace. It was quite exciting to see that this was so effective over time. And 1 university said this was unsurpassed in all the behavior change literature, that they hadn't seen anything like this in all the behavior change literature that they had done literature reviews with. So we answered the second question. Can you get behavior to be changed over time? The third question, which you may be asking, certainly I was, can you get enough people to do this? Or was this just, again, for the green elite? And this is where we began experimenting with the idea of different types of peer support groups. So again, we tried workplaces, we had service clubs, faith-based groups, social networks. But when we came to neighborhoods, we discovered, and this was another one of our revelatory moments. This was almost like we had discovered a Rosetta Stone for community organizing and for dealing with green behavior change. We discovered that in the neighborhood, you had the potential for co-benefits, not just the greenness of my lifestyle. And so we created a script based on watching best practices. And keep in mind, part of our work, part of how we got here, was the quality of social learning of our team. We would debrief every single eco team we debriefed for years. What worked, what didn't work, why. We would debrief by all the aspects of the program. We would debrief to find out if people were completing the eco team. And we had like a 90% completion rate, which is quite remarkable because of the peer support system. And along the way, we started finding out the neighborhood process was very, very powerful. And we began to debrief what people were saying and why they were getting results. And eventually, we came across this script. And then we got some foundation funding, and we did a market research study, 4 focus groups, four studies in 4 parts of the country, in the South, in the Southeast, in the Northwest, in the Northeast, and the Midwest. So a wide diversity of this country. And we had them, the people who were delivering this, this market research, ask the people on the phone this question. If your neighbor knocked on your door and said to you the following, how likely would you be to participate? Hi, I'm your neighbor. I'd like to invite you to a neighborhood gathering to hear about a program sponsored by, and then it would be the name of the city who was organizing it, to learn how we can better conserve resources for the sake of our children, to get to know each other better as neighbors, and to build a sense of community, to create a more livable community, a healthier and safer community, with some of the ways we define community. Here's what we found from that. 43% said very likely, 42% said somewhat likely. We're now into the late majority. We're now into the last group of people that we would want to get to who are predisposed to this social innovation when those 3 messages were delivered. What we began to discover was, on the one hand, I want my privacy. On the other hand, quality of life requires that I have some connectivity on the block that I live or in the building that I live. We tapped into that.